Hello and welcome to Kolkata's first and India's only literary festival curated by a bookstore, the APJ Kolkata Literary Festival. As we celebrate the 13th edition of the APJ Kolkata Literary Festival, it gives me a pleasure to host today's session, Regrets None, a Bear It All Memoir. We have with us veteran actor, newscaster, columnist, and casting director who has worked in advertising, communications, and public relations, Dolly Thakore. She is also a staunch social activist, particularly for children and destitute women and for citizens for peace. In conversation with Dolly Thakore is an arts and event curator and a presenter, a moderator, and a freelance writer, Oindrilla Dutt. She is associated with a number of NGOs and has served on the editorial board of Upper Crust magazine. She was the first delegate to the Cannes Ad Film Festival from Kolkata. We are delighted to welcome you to the virtual platform and we look forward to an interesting session. Over to you, ma'am, to take the conversation forward.
Thank you so much, Ritlina. And before anything else, I just want to hold up this fantastic book, Regrets None by Dolly Thakore.
I will hold it up for you too.
Good. And thank you so much, AKLF. This is the 13th edition of the APJ Lit Fest Literary Festival, Kolkata, APJ Kolkata Literary Festival. And it's wonderful because I've been associated for so long. And this is conducted by Oxford Bookstore, which is over 100 years old. And it's wonderful to be doing something with an institution that is part of Kolkata's heritage. So thank you, AKLF and Oxford. And Dolly, it is absolutely wonderful to be here with you.
Oindrilla, I'm also an institution.
Yes,
I met you years ago.
You are. And I have to say, while she was doing that intro, I kept thinking there's a lot we have in common. Cannes, we've done a lot of NGO work, and we'll come to that as we go.
I remember we met in Calcutta.
Yes, you did. Ladli, which is very dear to your heart, which I'll talk about later. But right at the start, let me ask, there are so many experiences you've had. The canvas of your experiences is vast. And this book reads like a veritable journey down memory lane for so many. There are so many known people. How did you go about choosing who and what you're going to include and what you're going to omit?
Oindrilla, it was very easy. I didn't have to think about it. Once I sat down to put my thoughts together, they just poured. And in fact, I didn't have diaries. I didn't have notes kept. Mind you, it all started in 1982, when, as many of you may know, that it was an emotionally traumatic time for me. But at that time, I thought I would put my thoughts together. But then there was so much else that demanded my attention in terms of paying money, in terms of running my house, in terms of looking after my son, who was 3 years old at the time. That, of course, everything else took a back seat. And I just began to work, and take up any assignment that came along. And I've had such an interesting life. I haven't had a day's boredom in my life, which very few people can claim.
In fact, I wanted to ask you, you've had so many careers, Dolly. You've been in advertising, you've been in writing, in casting, acting, broadcasting, newscasting, in PR and communications. There's so much you've done, and also moderated a lot and anchored. Now, you jumped into all of these with immediate acceptance and willingness. And you also worked in the UK as a single young woman at a time when it was quite rare. So where did you get that confidence from?
You know,
and some of it in very adverse circumstances.
The point is that when you're young, you're full of enthusiasm and you take up anything that comes your way. And I must say, I have never had to stretch my hand for anything or anybody. Even if you talk about the relationships I've had, I've never had to go searching for them. They just fell into my lap. And they have been very fruitful and encouraging relationships.
Yeah.
And also, every job that I had, I mean, if people were interested and will go do go through my book, they will find that it all just came my way, and I never had to say no. I didn't come from a family which had ambassadors and MLAs or ministers in their background, but I just got there, by saying yes to everything, and the opportunities came my way.
In fact, I wanted to ask you, Dolly, I talked about precarious conditions sometimes. There was a man who told you, come to London and I'll give you a job. And on the strength of that, you picked up your life from here and you moved to London.
Okay,
That
let me
takes
tell
guts.
you, he happened to be the head of the World Service at the BBC.
Yeah.
And this was at the Queen's birthday where we were all invited, and I was a little subsidiary to the British High Commission Information Service there. And I was having a conversation with him because there was nobody else that perhaps he could talk to or that I could talk to. And he was bloody good looking, there's no doubt about that. And he said, and I was a little dark thing with two little oily plaques standing next to it. And he said, Dolly, have you been to London? And I said, no, never, of course not. There was no chance of ever having dreamt about going to London even. And he said, well, if you ever do come to London, there will be a job for you. And before I knew it, standing beside him was the passport officer, who happened to be somebody that I knew and a friend who I used to intermediate between his very hot-headed Irish wife, and he was a Scotsman. And because she was always complaining about the servants polishing her shoes a different color or using a scrubber on the Teflon. And in those days, Teflon and all were unknown or unheard of. They were all very new. So she was always complaining about the domestic health. And I was the one who was the intermediary saying, brown polish pe, brown polish lagao, not kala, and all that. And before I knew, and he happened to be there, I knew them. And so before I knew it, the next morning I got these sheaf of papers, which were passport papers, entry permit papers, which had a photographer that came along with him to take a photograph of me. And before I knew it, I had a passport, I had an entry permit, with no effort from me at all. So I mean, I wish my life on other people also, with that kind of life.
That's wonderful. Tell me, Dolly, what were the high points of being Dolly Rawson when you were growing up? And how did it shape your life?
Look, my father was in the Air Force. And I must say I'm very grateful to the defense services because they gave you an open mind. You were not parochial, you were not communal, you were not linguistic, you were not narrow-minded. It gave you such a wide world to be and just be yourself. And those are the advantages that I had. I never had to worry about whether I was dark or fat or small or rich or poor. You were all equals, whether you spoke Hindi, Gujarati. There were no Gujarati speaking people in the Air Force, let me tell you. There were, South Indian, Marathas or whatever. And it was wonderful to be all equal. That is the India that I was born in. That is the childhood I've had. And that is the India that I love.
I'm going to jump forward a bit. You talked about the India that you were born in, an inclusive, multicultural India. How does that stack up against the India of today?
Oh, it saddens me greatly. There's no doubt about that. But things are changing. People's minds are changing. I suppose we who were brought up as a leftover of the British and the Raj and stuff like that had certain advantages, which I'm sure were envied and discriminated against by a lot of people. And so when they got the opportunity, they wanted equal rights and equal things. So it's very natural. It's human nature for things to go on and change.
Also, fact that you were a Christian, did that ever affect the way you were
Well,
regarded?
only in terms of marriage,
Oh,
because not
yes,
otherwise.
I read that.
So it was only when all my friends were getting married and the mothers were bringing out these red directories of the IFS and the IAS, and they would go for all the non-Christians for all the others, and the Christians were all in the railways or something like that, who were my lot. And that's the only time that I felt discriminated. And then I've written a whole story of how this woman said, your young daughter is very sweet, and this mother got all epileptic about her young daughter, she's not here.
Nandini Narayan's mother.
And there was, well, I would, not like to repeat names here, but for those that read the book, they will get the joke.
Okay.
And, that's how it, and that's what gave you a complex of being a Christian as opposed to being one of the society. We never had that kind of prejudice or discrimination or inferiority or a complex when we were in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when I left college and came to Delhi. And Delhi was made me more aware of it.
Yeah.
Because there was more consciousness of that in the Delhi society than it was elsewhere.
Dolly, you always had an open house, like your mother. And you had a vast circle of friends in London. There was Said Jafri, Farooq Dondi, who was an old friend, Roshan Seth, I think Jason was there for a while doing theatre, Zora Sehgal, and of course, Dolly Thakore, who you went on to marry. Tell us a bit about that life.
Well, look, everybody was getting married. And I was the new kid on the block, as it were. And I spoke English reasonably well. I was working for the BBC. And so when I joined the BBC, there were all these people who I joined with them to be in the theatre community and in the broadcasting community. And Dilip was a very good-looking young man, very well-spoken, and he was at Lincoln's Inn. And who at that age is averse to attention being paid? I was 23, 24 at the time. And all my friends were married. Some of them had even had children. And so I was the only one that was left out. And so I was obviously also vibrating and wanting to get married. And so when Dilip paid attention to me, I naturally allowed him and went out with him and encouraged him. And we spent 2 years in London together. And we did great things. We went to Spain, we went to Belgium, we went to Germany together. We traveled a great deal, and he opened up my mind to a lot of things, to theatre. But I was already in the theatre, but certainly not going to the theatre because I thought it was very expensive. But every Saturday or once a month on a Saturday, we would go to the theatre. So we kept doing things like that,
In fact, this Regrets None is really like a veritable history of English theatre in Bombay, largely in India. And that is fascinating to people who are interested in the theatre. You've known and worked with so many theatre greats. Take us through a bit of that, Dolly.
In fact, theatre was not the big thing that I was wanting to do. Mine was being on radio, broadcasting, and then when television came along, of course, being a newsreader and a newscaster and being recognized. But theatre was just one of the things that I did. And I've been on stage since the age of 5. So it wasn't something that I pursued. When I came to Bombay, I didn't go searching for theatre group, but that Kabir Bedi, who was a friend of mine from Delhi, he knew I was in the theatre. So he asked me on the 3rd day that I came to Bombay, Doll, do you want to come to a rehearsal? And I said, fine. And I went along. And that's where I was exposed to all the people that are mentioned in the book and who are very big names in theatre in India almost, not just Bombay, not just Mumbai anymore. And so, it just happened. And I've acted since then, I've been on stage all the time. In fact, during the pandemic time, what I missed the most is not being able to go to the theater to watch plays, to hug people, to be there. Now, even during the pandemic, I did a play for Zoom called Turning Point. In fact, it's done by a Calcutta group, The Red Curtain. And Sumit Roy was my director. And it was wonderful. The chair that I'm sitting in at the moment, if you can see it, is the chair that I sat in and did my Zoom play. And we did it for the spinal cord injury people. That was in Calcutta. My stage manager was in Chennai. My technical manager was in Ranchi or somewhere. My actor, one of them was in Calcutta, Dina Ardeshir, that you might know. And the two lead actors, the boy who was spinal cord injury affected, and the granddaughter that I got married to him, were in Bangalore. And what is so lovely is to launch this book, Regrets None. I went to Bangalore last month. And so Tanvi came to see me. And Mushi, who's the stage manager, came from Chennai to meet me in Bangalore. And it was the first time that we actually set eyes on each other and we hugged each other, and it was lovely meeting them. That is what you miss about the pandemic thing, because in theatre, there's a great deal of hugging and touching and, being together and exchanging things. And how much can you exchange on video and stuff like that?
And I love that you said at some point in the book that you hope when Quasar got into theatre, there's something you said about you hope that this is going to give him the home, the comfort of belonging.
What theatre. And he is, a touch wood, and I'm so glad that he is pretty well known and recognized, not just in Bombay, but in Mumbai, but everywhere else too. And he runs a festival called FESPO, which is for the under 25s. So, and those are people from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. So, it's amazing the number of people that he has groomed and brought out. And it's still going on, which is lovely. I'm very proud of my son. I'm sorry I could go on about it.
I know he said that, I'm not going to repeat it. It's a little profane. He said that even if he does something, you're going to think it smells like a perfume. But to go back to women in your book, you come from a family of very strong women who may not have gone out to work, a lot of them, excepting your auntie Rani, I think. And
no, my mother didn't work, but my grandmother worked.
What?
My eldest aunt, or Marcy, we never called her Marcy, but we called her Lavia Auntie. She was a nurse, and she worked with, attended to Firoz Gandhi and Pandit Nehru and people. So all the women in my family have worked.
And they've been
so have the men, but perhaps the women were a little more powerful and stronger and had more influence on all of us than the men did.
And that impacted on you, your life. And throughout your book, there's this recurring theme of the bonds that you forged with strong women. The amazing Pratima Bedi, Simi, Nandini Naran, Rani Dubey, Pamela Rooks. Tell us about these women.
Well, Simi was childhood, really, because we were very young. I had just arrived in Bombay. He was a bloody film star, so you can imagine what was the kind of wide-eyed honest that one has for that. But she did remain a good friend for a time, but I haven't seen her in a long time now. But when we do meet, there's always a hello and a very pleasant smile, etc. But certainly, Pratima Bedi, Arundhati Nag.
That's another one.
These are women who have been my strength all through. And even though Pratima is not with me anymore, but her family and her daughter, they're all my family. They're very, very, we're all very together.
Yeah. So it was a natural progression, I think, to Ladli, the Ladli National Media Awards. And as I said, that's when I first met you, when I served on the jury. But I really would like you to tell us about Ladli, about your commitment to fostering gender sensitivity.
Well, Ladli started with
population first.
With population first, but Ladli started mostly in trying to debalance the level of girl child to the boy child, because the women were all aborting the girl child. So we were trying to change that, and we succeeded. We did pretty well. But then we found that was not the only thing. There were lots of other social evils that came along with it. And then we concentrated on that, and we got the advertising world involved, so that if you notice, all the advertising, whether it was press or television or film, they changed from a girl going out to work or to buy a car for the father. It is the boy going out and buying a car for the father. We have the girl bringing her home as a present to the father. So, we tried to change the mindset, and we succeeded a great deal. There's a hell of a lot more to be achieved, but we've done quite a lot. And we're very proud of the work that we've done. Plus, we've given awards to and acknowledged women who have devoted their lives to working in this particular area. And Zora Sehgal, who was one of the women. Leela Seth. The first judge of the Supreme Court. So we've had a lot of successful women that we have acknowledged and recognized.
That's really wonderful work.
So my job in that, because I don't go to do the field work, but there are social workers that do that. Mine is purely communication and with the so-called acknowledged, established people. All my energy goes in doing that. And then since we have our annual shows held it used to be Delhi and Bombay, but for the last few years we've been having it in Bombay. But then I would fix up the rooms, the travel, the cars, look after that area. And so I would get the Oberoi and the Taj to give us rooms for these journalists coming from smaller towns and cities to attend the function. Yes. So all my energy is going to doing work like that, and I love it.
That comes through in your book. So, Dolly, you have met, and some you have known well, a number of personalities, giants, public figures. You met Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and that's a lovely story that you've told about the garland he threw and you caught, and how much you treasured it. You met His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Richard Attenborough, Indira Gandhi on a plane, a whole lot of people, Shashi Kapoor. Whose memory do you cherish, really cherish?
Every single one of them. Every single one of them. There's not one above the other. I cherish every single minute. And I never boasted about them, but they happened to me, and I loved it. It was wonderful, And the point is that these people acknowledged me years later.
Yes.
Not Pandit Nehru, because he was already gone in 1965. Yeah. But a lot of the others did. I mean, there was moderating a television program for festivals of France, and I had Mitterrand come and Rajiv Gandhi had arrived. Rajiv Gandhi standing in front of me and saying, "What can I do? They brought me here," and I was jabbering on like I am right now, going about who's visiting and why it's designed like this, because he'd arrived half an hour early. It was again during the time when security was getting a bit extra strenuous. And so, but I enjoyed every single, maybe it was at the time when of when I was born and India was changing. So you were given over. Today, there are any number of students who are far more qualified and then they've all been to either Stanford or, not Oxford and Cambridge, but a lot of them have gone to Stanford. And, so many people who've traveled abroad, they've all got so much more confidence. They're bankers, they are earning very well. They have a lot more in store for them. And all the opportunities that they have, which we didn't have. But I grabbed whatever little opportunities there were.
Yeah.
And I perhaps shone in them and made a mark of that. So.
Okay. Dolly, you've had a lot of heartbreak, which comes through in the book. And we come later to your other really long relationship in case you want to talk about it. But what is wonderful is that there's always an underlying sense of fun and laughter. And there are those wonderful incidents about Peter something, Alexandra, the Twiggy lookalike, and about my favorite is the one where you go and perch on your father's lap and you're very lovingly patting his cheek, and because you don't know what it means, you say, "You bloody bastard."
And I was 8 years old or 11 years old at the time.
So do you want to tell us a bit about maybe Alexandra and Peter? Because they're so funny.
Well, Alexandra was a transvestite who I dressed in a sari.
And a con.
In Cannes. We were attending the Advertising Cannes Film Festival together. And there she looked so super because I wear not cholis, I still do, but see if I show you. And but she was almost 8 inches taller than I am, but she wore the sari, the petticoat way below her navel. And she had a lovely sculpted figure. And she looked so good. But I even gave her my bindi and I gave her a silver chain that I used to wear.
She made off with it, all of it.
Made off with all of that. But it's a story that we've dined on for years. I mean, what can one do? Yeah. Luckily, it wasn't one of my best silk sarees, so I don't mind. But still, my choli, my blouse, everything else was fine.
And I have to say this for the readers. I think what was really funny is that she had invited Dolly and Alec for dinner and then made them pay. That was when they realized what a con she was.
And she went, "Ooh la la, I forgot my bag at home." And Alec looked at me and I looked at Alec, and Alec quietly counted out. In those days, the Indians had no foreign exchange. Head of advertising or not, you had no money. And he counted out whatever little foreign exchange he had and paid up the bill. And then when we were walking down the crossroad, he said to me in Hindi, "Tumne tumhara bikini kha liya." And she, of course, insisted on knowing what he said. So I said, "Well, he just said that the dinner bill, I've eaten my bikini because the dinner bill was so much." And she, of course, said, no, not to worry. I work here and I get a 50% discount and I will see that you don't leave Cannes without that bikini. Of course, she bloody well disappeared.
That was it. Okay. Tell me, what is it? How do you live life with so much zest still for everything? Is it a conscious decision when you get up in the morning, like during the lockdown? You said you taught yourself to do certain things.
No, I love everything that I do. Nothing is a chore. I hate cooking. I hate housework. So you won't find me dusting and cleaning and things like that. But reading, certainly reviewing things, rehearsals. The rehearsals were all held here. This little divan used to turn into a stage on which we would rehearse. So, you can't see it. It's not there to be hiding behind the thing. But my life, every minute of it has been a joy. Every day. There have been sadnesses.
Yeah.
I lost my most beautiful nephew.
Yes.
And that still saddens my heart and breaks my heart. But The world has changed so much. That happened in 2008. Life has to go on. And still talk over it very fondly, as the love hasn't diminished at all. But as I said, life has to go on. So.
We're going to have just 5 minutes, I think, more. So I'm going to race through these questions. You told us about Dilip and what you learned from him. What about your relationship with Alec? Heartbreaks apart, Quasar apart.
The point about these creative guys is that when they want to zero in on you, all stops are taken out, and they will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that they win every thought, every waking moment of yours. And Alec did that. He was very good at that. Not only to me, to Sharon, and but
everyone.
He is like that. And now I'm at a point where I can say that it's not that it didn't hurt me when he did choose another person, but that was 50 years ago. So it's all over, and I'm very happy that I had that experience. And I acted in my best plays with him. Death of a Salesman, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Inherit the Wind, A Streetcar Named Desire. I mean, I learned a lot in terms of theatre. And what was good was, I can't say because I was already broadcasting from London. I was already on TV and radio. But he did help. But there are certain words which I will mention. A word like regular. A lot of us mispronounce the word regular. He told me how to pronounce that correctly. The other word is development. If you listen to the news, they would say development but it's development. So the stress on the word. Another word that a lot of us mispronounce is, I think I've said beginning. These are three words that I can recall immediately for you. And it's amazing that that's what you learn. It wasn't like he sat with a ruler and said, you have to say like that. But
I know,
because you lived with him, because you were with him, these things came instinctively.
Okay, two quick questions. Why did you need a co-writer, a co-author? Is it because you were lazy and you thought this would be an objective?
No, I think it is lazy, because there was just so much, and I still got almost 2.5 feet of papers because I would write as and when I wanted the thing, and then I got out of it. I didn't want to sit down and put it all together. Then my son, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, said to me, "Mama, why don't you complete your book?" And I said, "No, baby, I got tired of it." And so he said, "No, I'm going to get Argya, who has directed me in plays. He's a friend of Quasar. I've known him for 20 years. He said, I'll get Argya to help you." So I just handed over these 3 feet of paper to Argya, and he went through all of it and then questioned me. And we did, I spoke to him on a tape recorder, and we put it all down to himself. It was effortless. I tried to put up, I don't know what he went through.
And are you thinking about a sequel? Have you thought about it?
What sequel? Now, what is my life? I mean, I'm going to be 79 in another 2 months' time. What sequel is there going to be to that?
Okay, last question before we end, and I need to ask you this. Dolly, at some point in the book, you said something to the effect, maybe I'm getting a couple of words wrong, that you always gave your all to a relationship. You gave yourself completely. And that is why, and not just your romantic relationships, and that is why the relationships never ended. They just changed form. I thought that was beautiful. So would you expand on it a little?
Look, with everyone, I'm still best friends. Sadly, of course, Alec is gone. And but the last year that Alec was ill, I was with him, staying the nights at his place. My other friend, who's mentioned in the book, Chris Srinivasan, who's in fact in Calcutta at the moment, he still remains for me, my best friend. But I can share what I want. I can ring up when I want. And the other one that I've just lost, which saddens one's heart no end,
Jerson.
Jerson. But Jerson was 92 years old. And the last meal was khichdi, which I sent from my house for him. And he had 3 spoons of that khichdi the night before. So, I mean, my relationships never end. I've been enriched by them. Of course, there's been sadness at the time when they break up, etc. But that's life.
I know. I think that is amazing. And what a journey this is. Really regrets none. And for those of you who don't have it, you can buy it at the Oxford Bookstore, or you can order it online, www.oxfordbookstore.com. Please pick up a copy. It's such a good read. And there's so much that you want to know from this book. Dolly, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. It's a fascinating journey you've taken us through. Thank you so much. Thank you, AKLF. Thank you, Oxford.
Oindrilla, thank you very much. And that you've done a very good study of the book, of every single thing.
That's the one thing I do. I read through whatever I'm
Lovely.
talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.